Welcome to the Aliveness Habit, refreshing conversations with everyday masters of aliveness. This is an interview series that is dedicated to exploring the full rapture of what it means to feel alive for each one of us. And I have a great guest with me today. The wonderful Rob Dale is here in the house, and we are going to have a fantastic conversation today, all things aliveness. And Rob is the co-owner of Rhapsody Strategies, which is a business and a leadership coaching firm based in Ottawa. And he's also one of the hosts of the Living Richly podcast. And it's a podcast that is all about discovering what it means to live your best life. So not too far off of what we're going to be talking about today.
It's in really well.
Yeah. And this podcast recently surpassed 75,000 subscribers. Oh my God, Rob, here you are talking with me. I love it. Thank you. And this is on YouTube, and they celebrated their 100th episode, and I'm really excited to go to your live event coming up in 2 days, so I can participate in that celebration.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rob, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thanks for being with me.
Alex, it's so great to be here. I'm really excited to be on it. I've been watching some of your episodes and some of the guests you've had, and hopefully I can do it justice. So we'll see where we go.
I know you will. So I'm gonna kick off the same way I kick off with all of my guests. Ask the fantastic, magical question. What does aliveness mean to you, and how has that experience of aliveness evolved for you over time?
Wow, yeah. Don't start with a softball. I mean, just go right at it, right? For me, aliveness is about showing up and living authentically every single day, finding that true voice of within you, and being able to engage in every relationship, in every situation, in every circumstance as your true authentic self. And how has that evolved? Oh my God, I mean, day and night. I spent most of my adult life living really by someone else's script, and choosing, because of insecurities, because of my own limiting beliefs, to allow other people to define who I am and how I was to live. And it's really only been in the last, I want to say, 3, 4, 5 years that I have begun to discover who Rob is, and to be able to live out of that identity of who I am. And to me, that is absolutely the greatest joy and the most incredible experience to have.
Wow. I love that. Who is Rob? And you said the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And why the last 3 to 5 years? I'm just curious. What?
Yeah, well, it really started with the beginning conversations that a number of us, certainly my business partner Eric and I, started to have conversations around this. Eric really began to lead the charge. He was going through a bit of his own crisis within his life, and began to journey into what we've called living richly, kind of journeying into what does that mean. And we're best friends. We're connected as business partners. A lot of those conversations began to be had where I was a part of them, and it really triggered for me. Well, what does that look like for me? And began to work with a therapist, and began to look at so much of the journey that I had been on up to that point, and how I like to say I'm a recovering people pleaser, and oftentimes fall back into that habit. And so in that context of being the people pleaser, whether it was in my personal relationships, whether it was with the significant other in my life, whether it was in my work relationships, I was constantly drowning out what mattered to me in order to fit into what mattered to other people. And it really was only in the last, like I say, in the last number of years, when that wake-up call began to happen, where, as I saw my business partner begin to take this journey, it was really inspiring for me to say, yeah, what does this look like for me, and how do I begin to experience this real life?
I love that. I love that, Rob. And so what what does it feel like for you to feel alive? How do you know you're
Well,
feeling
the feelings, it's interesting. So I'm a big believer in, and my therapist, the therapist I work with is a amazing lady, and we talk about her. We've had her on our show, talked about her a bunch of times. Her name is Dr. Sherry Kane. She's a psychologist in the States, works with, she does a lot of performance psychology stuff, very much rooted in cognitive behavior therapy. And so the notion of our feelings are really things we create out of the thoughts and the beliefs and the language that we have. And so I certainly would say when it comes to aliveness, what is that feeling is? Again, it's that feeling of, um, maybe I put it this way, you'll help me with the language around this. It's the removal of shame.
alive?
And so as I have walked into this place of, some of my core values and some of the beliefs that I've been able to show up in environments and show up around people without shame, is how I feel now. And that's a freedom to feel like I'm not having to be, this, I'm a horrible person, or all the stuff that brings us down,
Mhm.
and to show up feeling life, feeling alive, is probably the easy, well, probably the way I would describe it or explain it is just that's a sense of freedom that
Mm.
comes with realizing that you're not responsible for how somebody else perceives you or reacts to you or responds to you, and you can truly the aliveness that comes from, or the authenticity that comes from knowing that I can just show up and be me, and how other people respond is not my problem.
Mm. Yeah, I think the word freedom is definitely,
Great one.
yeah, there's such resonance, but that's like, I mean, such a big experience,
Yeah,
freedom, right? Like we sort of say like this feeling of freedom, but I mean it's true, and I do feel the same thing where you don't feel shackled to an expectation or to an
no,
outcome or to having to be anything. And I
yeah,
think I resonate with that experience of aliveness where it just is.
it just is. It's
Just
it's
is.
such a beautiful way to say it. Yeah. I grew up, so my background prior to being a business, when I moved into as a business coach, my background before that was I was a minister, and I worked in a very fundamental evangelical church environment for 25 years.
Mm.
Eric, my business partner, is also from that world, and that's where we first met, was in that world. He left that world a number of years before I did, and but I grew up in an environment. That's why I used the word shame earlier, and I'm not. This isn't a criticism of somebody who is a religious, somebody can, religious and goes to church and knock yourself out. By all means, that's not really my focus. I know from my experience, certainly as the minister in front of the room, that much of what I did was driven by shame.
Mhm.
The idea that you that by yourself you weren't good enough, that you needed God in order to be good enough, right? And there were these rules that were established by whoever interpreted God for you, established all of these do's and don'ts and rules, and there was just this shackling. And I remember when I left that world, there was certainly a moment where I was lost, because my entire identity, I started going to I started attending that denomination, the church that I became ordained through, when I was 16 years old. And so my entire, young adult and adult life was in that environment. And so when I left that world, at first I was in chaos because I was lost. I had no belief system. I had no sense of direction. My compass was gone. And so that's where it was and so this overwhelming almost darkness or burden around, what is it to be truly alive
Mm.
and to be free, use that word freedom again. And it took me a number of years, took me some healing, took some therapy for me to really kind of come to grips and release myself from that burden or that story, and to come to this point where, again, you said it beautifully just a few minutes ago, where you really can just show up, and it's about how you show up. And it's not about how you show up for someone else. It's about how you show up for yourself, and the freedom that comes from that, and establishing those, the idea that I can truly live a life where, if this is right for me and it aligns with my values, then I'm going to get to experience it, and I can take that journey, and I can enjoy the people around me who experience the same. Um, it's such a different way to approach life, for sure.
Yeah. I yeah, I appreciate what you're sharing, and it does um it does bring something up for me in terms of the word faith,
Yeah.
because I feel like faith is kind of this, I don't know, just anytime I bring the word up, in my coaching or in any, they're like, oh, faith, like, I don't want to go there. We don't talk about it. And it becomes this kind of, there's a religious connotation to the word faith.
Yeah.
Like for me, like faith is deeply um like embodied in the experience of aliveness. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious if that's the case for you, and if so, then how do you define faith, and what does that mean to you in that experience of feeling alive?
Oh, you're just going deeper and deeper with these questions, making them harder. We certainly, so when we talk about living richly in the living richly model, we talk about the four elements, right? And so earth representing the body, and the importance of us taking care of our body and being healthy and being grounded, and all of the components of what the body represents. Water, the second element of water, representing the mind, and again, this idea of our mindset is everything, and how we think dictates how we feel, as we just talked about a few minutes ago, and how important it is to be both uh, taking time to, just as it's important for us to take time to take care of our body, we need to invest that time into taking care of our mind. We talk about fire, which represents relationships, or the heart, passion, right? And it's the idea of who are those people in your life, that community of individuals, those three or four people that really ignite you, and really connect with you at that relationship. Why? We hear of so many people, show me the five people you spend the most time with, and I'll show you your future, kind of thing. And then the fourth one is wind. And we talk about wind as being the spirit, and the spirituality, faith, as you alluded to a few minutes ago. And what is that? And one of the things I certainly recognize is that it's different for everyone. But just like you, when we introduce the four elements, and we talk about the four quadrants, or the four pieces of living richly, the one that everybody struggles, or most people struggle with the most, and they just kind of almost go, don't talk spirituality. I'm an incredibly spiritual person today.
Yeah.
I am far from a religious person today. I probably, if anything, I embrace the concepts of Buddha more than probably any other concept, or there was an interesting book that came out. What's set so, and that was the hardest one for me, because of my background. I was like, I'll work on body, I'll work on heart, I'll work on mind, but fuck off spirit. And it took me a lot. Like it really was only in the last while. And there was a book that absolutely shifted my entire focus on it. And it's a book. The title of the book is The Soul Boom.
Mm-hmm.
So SOUL Boom. And it's written by Rainn Wilson. Now, when you mention Rainn Wilson's name, most people don't know his name. Do you know who Rainn Wilson is?
No.
Okay, so, and that's normal. That's what most people are. Have you ever watched The Office?
Yes.
Okay, Dwight?
Yes.
Rainn Wilson.
Oh, you know what?
So,
I kind of recognize. I know. I was like, I want to say no because I don't want you to ask me. Okay,
right.
But okay,
Everybody has that same. They're like, Dwight from The Office
he
wrote a book
wrote
on
that book.
spirituality,
Yeah.
and he wrote a book called Soul Boom. He's got
Huh.
a podcast,
Huh.
both, I think it's YouTube and Soul Boom, and he has some actors, and he has all these different people that he's connected to on there. all talking about this notion of, he makes the argument that what, he's certainly more, his attention is United States, but when he says, what America needs or what the world needs, he's usually more pinned there. I think it's bigger than that. Is he basically says we need a spiritual revolution,
Yeah.
and that there is such a lacking because certain groups, whether it's the fundamentalists of any religious group, have hijacked faith,
Yeah.
and yet we are incredibly spiritual beings.
Mm.
There is we know that there is more to life than just this,
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what is that? And what does that mean? And what it means for you and what it means for me, maybe the same, maybe totally different. How it's expressed, maybe, but my God, we need to at least express or discover what it is for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's become really important element for me. I'm still
Yeah.
figuring that one out though.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But I do feel like I think you and I share a similar love.
Yeah.
It's for asking questions and
Yeah.
curiosity. And I do feel like faith has something to do with that. Um,
Mm.
the power of curiosity, the power of not knowing, the
Yeah.
power and the experience of being in this beautiful space that we inhabit in a way that where we don't know all the answers, we don't know
Yeah.
everything, and we spend so much of our time every
Mhm.
single day trying to get to the bottom of everything
Yeah.
and trying to
Yeah.
fix everything and solve everything, and yet so much of what surrounds us and how we live life, we just simply can't know. And so I'm just curious, if you share that similar.
Oh my God, yes. And you're right. We're very much aligned on that. It's, I want to go back and add to my answer to what is aliveness, because I think that there's a sense of wonder that
Mm,
is a part of what it means to be alive, and to be able to take that in. We are, it has become cliche for us to say, be in the moment, live in the moment. And
mm,
yet most people never do.
yeah.
And I remember I was taking a while. I used to live downtown Ottawa, right near Parliament Hill, and I used to at a Doberman that I would take walks down behind the hill, down by the Ottawa River. For those that maybe are listening or familiar with the area, would take a walks down by that area, and I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember the podcast. It was business related, but they had some, guy, he had a guest on that was talking about, and he was talking about being in the moment. And he was explaining about how, he would go out and he would be listening, when he go for walks and listening to the birds and listening to just all of the energy around him and taking it in. And here I am listening to him talking and not doing anything that he's describing. I'm not being in the moment at all. I'm listening to a podcast and not paying attention to the environment that I'm in. And I remember it was the day that I turned, and again, and I don't listen, if you're listening to this podcast right now, if you're listening to this episode while you're taking a walk, this is an exception. But I remember, turning off, taking my AirPods out, and just paying attention. And I heard the water running, and I could hear some geese over on the island, and you could hear the cars and the noise and the hustle and bustle of the city. People come by, and you hear the gears of the bicycle as they went by, or conversations as people were engaged, and
Mm,
you could almost hear the wind, right, when you paused.
mhm,
And I was in awe. And I suddenly I noticed flowers, and I just noticed all of it. And it is a different experience. And and again, for a lot of I typically I walk for at least half an hour to an hour a day. I usually go for a walk. I was out earlier this morning and did just that. And being able to just take in the sounds and the environment and the experience, it brings a sense of wonder. And to go back to what you were just saying, have you ever defined what your core values are
Hmm.
for yourself?
Yes.
What are they?
Spaciousness,
Okay.
humanity,
Mm.
um, truth,
I'm putting you on the spot. I realize that, but
truth, which is an
yeah,
interesting one.
yeah, that's a powerful
But
one.
source, like source,
Yeah.
um, and graciousness.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. See, those
Graciousness
are,
for me encompasses reciprocity um and just that giving and receiving. Because I've really sat with these words for a while, and I try them on. I go out in the world and I
yeah,
try these words on, and I'm like, is that really what it is? Is that really what I'm valuing? And so, I really try to land on the word, and the word grace and graciousness has always has always felt very alive for me.
yeah.
And and when I really started to say, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be gracious? And it's really, I think for me, it's that the reciprocity
Yeah.
of giving and receiving and giving and receiving. And it's something for me that I have been working on personally for a very long time, is to be able
Mm.
to receive as much as I give, because I think I hear that a lot. I'm sure you do as well in your work and in your world, where like people pleasers give a lot. We give, right? It's like we're giving, 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 and then
Yep.
we complain because we don't feel like we're receiving at the same level that we give. But
Yeah.
oftentimes I find, and personally, this is my personal experience, is that I blocked my receiving for so long. I was blocking so much love and so much that was wanting to come in. I was blocking it. And that was my
Mm.
work. I had to really, I had to do a lot of work around, really allowing and letting be, a lot of allowing
Yeah.
and letting be,
Yeah.
um, which I think is also where you talk about the shame and all these emotions that get lodged in our beings. I feel like the real receiving that's the work that lives in the real
The
receiving.
the limiting beliefs, right? That keep us, and you're exactly right. Often, and I remember looking at the number of times where I'd be like, well, I give, 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 and I never receive, or I never get back. And it's like, but I never ask
Right,
because I don't believe I'm worthy of receiving it.
right.
And so,
Hey,
to
I
your
never
point,
asked.
I've blocked
Yeah,
that off. I've got the
yeah,
limiting belief that keeps me from taking
totally,
that step into
totally.
whatever it is that I might receive. I love that you said grace, because I can't show it to you just because it's one, I'd be upside down, but my very
Oh,
first
wow.
tattoo, that if I was standing the right way, is says the word grace.
Hmm.
And
What does that mean to you?
well,
What?
for me, so this one initially came out of, it did come out of my religious background. It was is when I had it done, and it was a quote from an author, a religious author, an evangelical author by the name of Philip Yancey, who says, "There's nothing you can do to make God love you more. There's nothing you can do to make God love you less. That God loves you exactly as you are." Now, I don't necessarily believe that in that church world, that environment, that necessarily people truly believe that, but I do. And I also believe, and I've shifted it now, where it has evolved for me is that as I approach, first of all, first me, there's nothing I can do to be loved or to love myself more or less, that
Mm-hmm,
I am loved just simply by being.
mm-hmm,
And so it's not based on doing, but also in how I interact with other people. It's to show up and unconditionally love and accept people where they are at, without putting the expectation on them to be something that either I'm trying to define or that somebody else is trying to define. And
yeah.
that came about, again, I know I mentioned a lot of books. I'm a big reader. Again, that's where the curiosity comes in. Probably one of our most powerful guests we've had on our show is also a guy who came out of that religious background, but he's Dr. Kelly Flanagan, and he's written a couple of books, but his most powerful epic book to me is a book called Lovable, in which he talks about that so much of us try to find our identity and then find love and acceptance in the identity. And he flips it around. He says, if you find love, if you accept yourself as who you are, you will then find your community out of that, and you will find the expression of your purpose out of that. But you're not worthy because of what you do. You're worthy because of because of being, just because you are.
Mm.
And it's a shift in that. So that's how it's kind of shifted for me, for sure. But I
Mm.
love that. I love that the notion of grace. Uh, it's lost for many in the world today. It's a lost concept.
I agree. I agree. And for me, grace is very intrinsically tied to reverence. And I don't mean that again
Yes.
religious, but it's more of a deep wonder and awe. And it's
Yeah.
just an ability to not need to know.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I love the word reference. I'm also I'm a big fan of words.
Yeah.
Reverence. The other word that ties to reverence, that is one of my favorite words to use, is the word sacred.
Yeah.
And the idea, and I often will say this, even with coaching clients, like, and again, I'm working often with most of my coaching clients. I'm working with, these are business owners of successful businesses who are just, whether they're struggling or they just need that outside perspective on things. And I will often, they'll ask a question. They say, am I allowed to ask this? Can we talk about this? But I'll say, listen, I want you to understand something. Our coaching session, our time together is sacred. It's a sacred space. And they almost always, when I first say that to them, some of them are used to me saying it, but they'll kind of, well, what do you mean by that? And exactly that is, there is a reverence that I hold to this space, that whatever is asked, whatever is discussed, like, it is a place where we can just truly understand, and this is your space, and I'm here just to help facilitate you wherever you need to go on this journey in our coaching moment.
Mhm.
And so in that sense, it's sacred. The word sacred, when you use it from a religious even from the religious context, if we were to basically use it in its most simplest means, or English language, sacred is to be set apart.
Mm.
It's to take something and to set it apart
Mm.
and recognize it in its specialness as set apart from normal. And that's where I see there's to enjoy sacred moments.
Mm.
Um, there's something incredible about that, for sure.
Yep, there sure is. And I loved I pulled something that I saw. I think it was on one of your posts, and it says, um, live richly, not just for yourself, but for the countless lives you'll enrich along the way.
Yeah, you caught me on the day that I'm editing our episode 96. Now, again, depending on when this episode goes out for you, it'll either have been just released or it will be coming out, and it's all on legacy.
Yeah.
And so it fits into exactly that, is this idea that, and I remember when I left my old life, I share a story in my episode about sitting alone. I was at a friend's, I was staying with a friend. I had not only left the church world, I had ended my marriage, and I was sitting alone. My whole reputation was ruined. My everything I'd built for, I would have been, in my mid 40s at the time. Everything I built in my life at that point was literally gone. My kids, my girls were 16 and 21, and they were kind of just, figuring things out with me. And I remember it was my birthday, and going out with, they joined me, and we went out for my birthday. It was literally a month after I moved out, and we spent a bit of time together. I didn't want them to leave, but they went back to their moms, and I'm sitting completely all alone. And I remember thinking in that moment, is this it? Is like, I've lost everything, I've blown up everything. Is this how I'm going to be known? And I remember in that moment realizing, no, I've got the pen for my
Mm.
story. I get to write the next chapter, and I get it to say whatever I want it to say. And the other people are gonna give their version of my story, but I get to actually write the story. I get to have that pen in my hand, and I think that's where things like grace and things like wonder and all of that, really, even though it's only been in the last few years that I've been able to really kind of articulate it, that all started to happen. That was in 2012, and that all started to happen in 2000 2012 when I began to kind of, for the first time, realize that my identity wasn't wrapped up in what I did or in the people I was around, all of that kind of stuff. So
Mm.
there's something special there. And for anybody that might be listening, you're in a place where you're just kind of still caught up in the people pleasing, caught up in not having your voice, caught up in the worry and the stress of everything around you, caught up in following other people's rules. There is freedom from all of that. And it's just one step at a time. And there's a few of us that have figured out, there's lots of us, not just a few of us, that have figured out that journey and begun to take it, which is incredible.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you on that. And it's important to have these conversations because
Yeah.
it just illuminates, and it only takes, one moment that can change, or you happen to be in the right place at the right time, waiting for
Yeah.
the right nugget, and all of a sudden something shifts. And so I don't think we can have enough of these conversations, because you
The
just never.
accumulation of all these, right? The accumulation of all these conversations happen then in a moment where the trigger happens, right?
Yes,
But
agreed.
it's built up. There's so many moments that lead to the moment.
Totally. And what I really, really appreciate about that quote, and the one that I shared, is that, we don't do this work for ourselves necessarily.
No.
We do this work for the greater, um, the greater energetic pool
Yeah.
of the world. And, um, and I think when we can take it, out of ourselves and into this bigger purpose, this bigger raison d'être, it's not
Yeah.
just about us. And we then share our energy and our joy and our wonder and our awe and our grace, out into the world. And it matters. It really, really matters, especially
It
now in
does.
this day and age, where the instinct is to shrink and to contract. And we need to continue expanding and, countering that energy. So, I really appreciate the work that you do, and all the energy, the great energy that you bring into the world, because it really does.
Well, thank you, and the feeling's mutual, Alex. You're so right. There needs to be. There are so many who are who feel the way that that they're aligning with the stuff that we're talking about, and they're just afraid to use their voice. And there's no judgment in that. There's just recognition that when that's where we are. And what I often will say is, take one step.
Yeah.
Talk to one person. Share one thought with one person who's in your circle, and see where that goes. And it's amazing to me how often people will be like, "Oh, you're feeling that way too?" And
Mhm.
and I think you're right. There is such a need for the positivity to begin to really flow into the world today. Um, More than at any time, maybe not. I'm not sure. I haven't been around for every time, but I know that in this moment there needs to be people who don't care if other people go, you're
Yeah.
you're just wishy-washy, or you're just, that's all foo-foo, or whatever the case might be, right? Like, just, and that's one of the, and when you start to live authentically, when you start to truly live your own voice, you stop caring.
Yeah.
I have people say to me all the time, I'm not in, I've had people say, even with the podcast, I'm not into all that kind of, that's just goofy stuff or whatever. Okay,
Sure. Sure.
great.
Yeah. Not for
Thanks for,
you yet. Not for you
yeah,
yet.
no problem. No problem. Right. And you're
Right.
absolutely right. And you just keep sharing the message.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. That's what we're here in service though. So we have to continue sharing the good stuff. And
Yeah.
so we're gonna have to wrap it up. Unfortunately,
Right.
I feel like we could just continue speaking on forever. And no doubt when
Yeah.
I see you on Wednesday, which I'm excited to meet you, I'm going to,
Yes.
yeah, we're gonna continue our chats. But what is one thing, as we wrap up, that you would like people to know about the experience of aliveness?
Uh, that it's for you.
Mm.
It isn't just for someone else. It isn't just, oh, that person, they're so lucky, or they've got everything going. That ability to experience fullness and aliveness is meant for you, for every one of us. And if we can just get out of our own head and past the inner critic who tries to tell you, yeah, that's for other people, not for you. That's a lie. It is for you. And I would encourage everyone to begin the journey of discovering what it means to be alive for themselves.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today, Rob. It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Alex. So glad to be a part of it and can't wait to meet you in person.
Awesome.